and that's enough of that. YouTube, and welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. Today I'm taking a look at the latest release from the Doctor Who Big Finish line, and that is the novel adaptation of Nightshade. Now personally, I've never actually listened to a novel adaptation from Big Finish, so I was very intrigued by this release actually, because it's one of those ones that generally has a really appealing cover with a very interesting concept that I've actually never read the book, so I don't know what was going on in this story, and once again I went into this one without knowing absolutely anything about it. And there was something certain that intrigued me to this story that hasn't really intrigued me to any other so far from listening to Big Finish. So as always, I will leave in the description below the little link to go and buy this from the Big Finish website. It's $14.99 and it has just came out, and it is a very nice release. Said something that's actually attracted me to this release through interest, through worries as well, as sort of just being generally very interested in how this is actually being pulled off. Because one, novel adaptations, I've never ever gone into the Virgin novels of Doctor Who, which came out during the 1990s, and I heard a few things about them. Heard there's a few good ones in there involving Sylvester McCoy. I've heard some titles that keep on cropping up over and over again, some of which having a very twisted storyline. And then we have this one, which is a 7th Doctor story from the Virgin novel series with the 7th Doctor and Ace, and it's called Nightshade, written by Mark Gatiss. Now, if you're familiar with the new series, Mark Gatiss will probably have two feelings. You'll either like his stories, or you'll probably be very worried about me saying Mark Gatiss in a review. And yes, I'll admit, I was actually quite worried about this release to start with as soon as I seen his name on the front cover. But that said, I was also intrigued because I think that he has quite a dark sense of humour. Mark Gatiss, that is very well known if you've been on Twitter and things like that. He does have a very dark idea of humour, and that's something that the Virgin novels actually have. And I think that this is something that definitely was very interesting to go into, and I must say, I enjoyed it. Now, not all the credit can go to Mark Gatiss for this release. Of course, he did actually write in the initial story, but this has also been adapted especially for this release as it is a book. So it was adapted by Kyle C. Sikora, I believe I've got that right, I don't know, but yeah, it is on there. And yeah, I was intrigued by this release because it is essentially a whole book. It's set in the format of the monthly range in a way. It's the same running time of 2 hours, and yeah, they basically split it up into 2 episodes. The cliffhanger for episode 1, the one and only cliffhanger for the story, isn't really much of a cliffhanger really. Now first off, I'm going to say about something which I never normally say about with Big Finish first, and it is the sound design. As I previously mentioned in other reviews, it has been good, but for this release, I genuinely believed it. I believed that when I shut my eyes, I could actually imagine this episode being real. Sound design for the story, going down to the music, down to the special effects, down to the rain ideas, things like that. Even just the little tiny things of gulping from tea, and you know, or just little tiny things, even just like the breathing, things like that. Just general little things that normally you take for granted in TV, which actually goes to quite a lot. It does actually add a bit of audio in there, and audio is very important. And for something for Big Finish, which solely bases around that, this episode genuinely is probably one of the best sound design stories that I've heard in absolutely ages. The music itself fits the 7th Doctor brilliantly. I would dare say that I do actually recognise some of it from some previous 7th Doctor stories. I do believe some of which may have come from Time Will Tell, the Remembrance of the Daleks, very opening sequence with the coffin going away and the funeral at the very end, and that music, there is a bit there. And I do believe you also get a bit of a remix, sort of a rehash of the ending bit where we go somewhere else, the tea's getting called, that survival ending. I do believe we get a bit of music from that as well. But genuinely it is a bit of a rehash here and there of music actually seen in the series, which is quite a rare thing for Big Finish, I do believe. But I really enjoyed this release for the music, and for that alone it is a brilliant story for that. But the sole premise of the story is based around sort of this TV programme called Nightshade. I don't actually know if it existed, I'm guessing it didn't, but yeah, Nightshade is basically this programme that has this person called Professor Nightshade, and he fights these creatures. And the thing that we get to hear for this story is a phone call between Edmund, who is playing the Professor in this programme that's sort of been long gone, and an interview with the BBC. And it's very unusual because I don't know what it was, but with the story, I've never actually heard the BBC being mentioned within conversation in Doctor Who. This is an episode that does that. We get to hear about the BBC within the first few minutes and how there's going to be a phone call about Nightshade. We never actually find out what that phone call is, unfortunately, in the story, which you'll find out why if you do actually listen to it. But yeah, it is genuinely a very interesting release because I think that genuinely it has a very different taste towards other stories that I've listened to. For example, most recently the monthly range, things like Aquatine, Waters of Amsterdam, all the main ones from the monthly range, and even the most recent Master Trilogy ones. This story does have a different twist. It does feel different. It doesn't feel like a monthly range story, and that is just something genuinely that I'm guessing is coming from the fact that this was once a novel. As I haven't actually read the book of Nightshade, I don't know how much was cut out here and there, but generally I understood the story. I didn't feel that anything was cut out in places that should have been kept in. I did generally understand the story. I felt that the plot worked well, and I think that the choice of bits being cut out did work very well also. Interestingly, the cast for the story is actually quite a small one. We have Sylvester McCoy as the Doctor, which I adored him in this story. Quite interestingly, he did actually play quite a different role, which I don't understand if that's something to do with the Virgin novel series, but he wants to retire. At the very start of the story, we hear about him wanting to retire and settle down for a bit, which, funny enough, is something that the 11th Doctor did in Series 6, but not really going in too much to that. But yeah, and we do actually get quite an interesting thing there, and he does actually feel quite emotional about it, which is something that I love. I think the 7th Doctor did definitely have some brilliant moments throughout this story. Sophie Aldred as Ace, and to this point I've never actually heard Sophie Aldred as Ace on Big Finish in a full story, and I adored her in it. Honestly, the 7th Doctor and Ace, it's like they've never left screen. It is just brilliant. I love that combination of companion. I think they work brilliantly together, as with quite a few people do. So yeah, I think that is a brilliant combination. I'm glad that it's just carried across so well in Big Finish. John Castle, who plays Edmund Shrisvik. I can't say his second name at all, but yeah, he's a brilliant character in it as well. I genuinely really liked him. I felt that he was played excellently. I would say a very important part to the story, actually. Of course, he is Professor Nightshade, which is the story that it's based around. But yeah, he did play a very good role. Samuel Barner as Robin. Once again, we have an interesting relationship between Ace and Robin in the story, which is something that I didn't expect. I was a bit worried with to start with it being a Mark Gatiss story. But yeah, interestingly, if you don't want the story to be ruined, don't watch the review. But yeah, I am going to say about the story. But yeah, basically, Ace finds Robin, they meet and they have this conversation, and they're with each other for quite a lot throughout the story. And by the end of it, she's thinking about settling down with him and leaving the Doctor. And yeah, I think that was brought on very quickly, and I did get a bit sort of, I'm guessing that with the book there may have been a bit more development in there or something, but yeah, I think that was a very quick thing. Of course, at the very end of the story, interestingly, it leaves her to make the decision if she wants to stay with Robin or go with the Doctor, and I'm guessing that she chooses to go with the Doctor because I've heard things about how she does in fact leave the show in Big Finish in the past and in the books and things, so I don't know how far they're going to go with that, but yeah, I don't know if that's going to get caught up at some point either. We have Catherine Jakeway as Jill, Edmund Harrison as Dr. Hawthorne, which once again not really too much of a role. He was nice though. McCanty as Lawrence, and Tom Price as Sergeant Barclay, and then somebody else who I will not mention yet. But yeah, genuinely what I noticed for this story is quite a low cast compared to the monthly range. There is a lot of little roles in there, some of which only have a few lines, but this one is a very quite small cast story. It's in fact based in a village, and we have the bodies going missing and things, and the radio telescope, and it is quite a basic surrounded story really, a village, a telescope, sorted. But yeah, as a basic summary for the story, because I really think that it's something that you need to listen to fully understand with it once being a novel. But yeah, basically the Doctor and Ace land in this nice tranquil little village. They go for breakfast, and there's a really nice scene against this retirement thing which I've previously mentioned, and yeah, Ace goes off and of course bumps into this hole in a fence, which then leads to the radio telescope. Some odd things have been going on. There's been some power cuts and some dodgy security. We hear about this monster type thing. We're about this monster type thing later on in the story, and a very interesting scene between Edmund. He goes to sleep, wakes back up again, and then we hear this extremely creepy voice, which I can't even... And that's enough of that. That's incredibly creepy. I listened to this at about 10 o'clock at night, 10 o'clock to 11, and yeah, I was creeped out. Not gonna lie, it even has a warning at the beginning, actually, that saying that it's not for people who have a nervous disposition or for young children, and it is a very horror style of story, very creepy voice, and basically Edmund wakes up to this giant creature, and it's something that resembles that of the programme that used to be in called Nightshade, and that's why they're chanting that, and basically it's the big golden fly thing from the cover. We then later find out that these creatures are sort of becoming fears, and they're manifesting themselves into these fears. And yeah, it is a very interesting idea, some of which is a bit simple in places. I did genuinely really like it though. I've not really found it a story that's too hard to follow. I think that for episode 1, it takes it quite nicely, it takes it quite slowly, so the viewer can sort of get engaged with the characters and learn who they are, which I found with the story that I did. And then part 2 tends to go to a few different places. We go to like under this mining thing, And we have this very interesting scene between Edmund and the Doctor, which I think is very good. I've honestly, I've not heard a scene like it in Big Finish for a while, and it's just excellent. I loved it, and definitely included a sacrifice in there, which once again, a Big Finish death that I genuinely didn't expect. Take note, new series. We generally have a very limited amount of characters as well, with there's people in Crookmarsham, which is the village, and I like that. I think that if it was any other setting, it wouldn't have really worked. Part 2 has more of that effect in there, definitely goes a little bit faster, and if I was to say anything to be improved for this release, it would be maybe a bit more of an even spread, to have Fair Dues a nice opening, which I do think episode 1 does definitely do that, but maybe have a bit more of episode 2 brought into episode 1, making episode 2 feel less crammed, because I definitely think towards the ending of the story, parts ended in places you felt like it was coming to the end of the story, then more will be added on. And yeah, there was a few parts and places where I did feel like it went all over the place, but I did still enjoy it. I think that it worked well. But yeah, I just feel that some parts are a little bit staggered in places, which is from what you would understand, because I assume that they've just got the key scenes from the book, blended it together as much as possible, no doubt filled it in places in some parts with a bit of sort of interlocking parts to make it sound a bit more sense, I guess. But yeah, other than that, from what I expect, really, I liked it. I think that for 2 hours to cover a whole book, it does an incredible job. But yeah, I just think that the second part does have a bit of staggered parts in there, which I guess you would need to figure out for yourself if you did, of course, buy this. I think it's definitely one of those ones which is one of those ones to listen to get the full impact, really. As I mentioned, the very ending of the episode has something that, once again, a jaw-dropping moment, which I genuinely found my jaw did drop. I was shocked because, as I said, the alien sort of manifests itself around fear, and during this story the Doctor wants to retire, and we have a few little flashbacks in there to Susan, which we have a few referencing to at the start of the story, and then at the very end we have the Doctor sort of imagining going back to see Susan at the end of Dalek Invasion of Earth. And what I loved about this story, and honestly just filled me with tons of hope and amazement, and it was we have the 7th Doctor rephrasing "one day I shall come back" in a dream sequence, meeting Carol Ann Ford as Susan, and it's just amazing. I loved it, honestly. I think it's one of those nice little things that I think could have easily happened in the new series but hasn't. But yeah, I love that bit. I honestly, I think that it's a perfect little moment. It's something not overdone for fan service or anything like that. It worked with the story. I loved it. And a nice little guest star of Carol Ann Ford as well, which is somebody that I'm yet to really get into for Big Finish, but I do intend to in the future. That's that, really. When it's came to novel adaptations in the past for Big Finish, I've not really delved into them. I've not actually delved into the Virgin Novels books either, and it's nice to actually get something that's related to the Virgin Novels but in the audio form. Genuinely, I find it really interesting to see the 7th Doctor in a slightly new mood and a different attitude compared to that of the TV series, as some people think he was a bit jokey in places and he got more serious towards the end. But personally, I think that that's what made his Doctor quite good, actually. That little sort of transition in there. Sometimes actually the opposite to what we get to see with other Doctors. But yeah, genuinely a really nice release. I think that the novel adaptations are definitely something new from Big Finish, as this is only the 9th release that they've done. Yeah, I do believe they've not really done many novel adaptations in the past, and the majority, from what I can see, seem to be the 7th Doctor and the 4th Doctor, including ones like the English Way of Death, some of the well-known ones like that. So it would be nice to see a few more in the future. I do think there is actually a few more of them coming out this year according to this, and there is the original Sin coming out in December with Sylvester McCoy, and I do believe there is another one also out in December, which that's TBA. So Original Sin is based on an original 1995 New Adventures novel by Andy Lane, so they do seem to go with the New Adventures and the Virgin Novels line, which is something interesting, and I would definitely like to see more of them in the future. Thanks for watching this review. As I said at the very beginning, I will leave it in the description below, the release thing from the Big Finish website to go and download or buy this release. It is $14.99, or I do believe a little bit cheaper for the download version. Personally, buy the physical one and you get the download with it, because that's a bargain, isn't it? And for this release, I do really think it, so I'd highly recommend this story. As I said, link will be below. So thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a big like, and please subscribe if you're not already. If any questions, please do leave them below. I'll be sure to answer them at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching. I shall see you all next time. So thanks for watching, and bye for now.